Hi, welcome back. Here we are meeting up with Shawn, and he's talking about cast drawing. And Shawn's been with me, it turns out, 3 years. I was picturing about a year, Shawn, maybe two. So I think you guys exaggerate out there when you think how many years it is. But anyway, I'll talk to Shawn in a few minutes. You'll be introduced to him in a second, but he's already on my screen. But he's sharing a cast drawing in which he's trying to work in the visual order. And I'm just going to walk everybody through this cast drawing. And then at the end, he's got a bunch of questions that were the impetus for this thing in the first place. And by the way, welcome, Shawn.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and so do feel free to speak up. I'm going to say some things about what you've done here, starting in the very first one, and I'm going to go right through these. This is a little bit new to me. I did this with our Toronto friend, and I'm going to do one with Shawn now. This is the cast done in the visual order. So I'm just going to talk about it as if it were a critique, all right? So Shawn this is the first hour or so, am I right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what we do is we set up the top and the bottom so that these are placed, the lowest points are established. We try to get them on angle to each other, so he might draw from here all the way down, say, to here, and try to get this angle right as well. He's got the issue of trying to place it well on the page, and for that I recommend that he drop a line through the cast and try to find that point that establishes the equilibrium between the left side of the junk and the right side of the junk of the general impression. And so presumably he finds a spot, say the dip in the neck there, and he puts it, I guess you decided it was the side of the head, Shawn, and he puts that right in the middle of the paper, and that's as close as to equilibrium as I'm expecting anybody to get. You'll learn over time to do it in different ways depending on the setting if you're painting a landscape outdoors. But for this purpose, a single object in front of you, that's a thing. So you establish the top and bottom. Gamble used to say put it a half inch from the top and a half inch from the bottom. Well, that was when we were drawing the figure. So when we're doing a cast that might be the size of the paper, that still is recommended, something like that. This cast is pretty large. Is that 4 feet high, Shawn? This discus thrower? I can't remember what.
No, I think it's like 2.5 or something, or two.
And your
Is
paper,
that,
so it's pretty close to life size the way you're doing it. And
yeah.
and this is my alignment on the page for you guys who are watching. So, in any case, we have an attempt to establish a top, and an attempt to establish something of the lowest point. And in the course of this thing, for example, if you're deciding a equilibrium point is just, say this thing here is just to the right of center, Shawn's also establishing forever a place left and right that's not going to be changing. So then every placement is based on that initially, right? And permanently, actually. So when Shawn goes down to subdivide, if he looks like he's dropping down here to find something that's rather in line. These things here, they seem to be rather in line with this, almost in a plumb way. And so, making use of some points that are maybe givens, as it were. But this is the given, and there's no other given left-right point. So if your widths are off, you can't, and if this doesn't move to correct a width, you have to move your widths from the left and from the right if there's an overall width, et cetera, right? All right, let's not make more of it than that. But so what I'm trying to do is, you can see that Shawn has actually started masking. So he's done line, and then he's masked them fairly quickly. I think, Shawn, I'd be right in saying you've got around a bit with line, just sort of floating some lines, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Basic strategy that I teach, and then he's gone to, as soon as he thinks they're in some plausible orientation, he goes ahead and goes to massing these areas, and so he gets that going on there. And we do with Gamma, we used to, not immediately, but wouldn't wait real long before we mass it right out to the end. But in any case, Shawn's done well in that he's tried to make this look like it just goes on, so it doesn't have this harsh edge at one side that makes you look at it as if it were a thing. So that's good. And Shawn, so then what you did is you came down the side here, and you're floating this line here. You've gotten around. And my model for all this stuff is to get around like a star shape. So you're on the top here, to be down over here, to be over here somewhere, and like that, trying to just get around and around. It looks like you may have a little hint of a place down here as well. Now, I think, Shawn, there's only two things that I recommend against doing, and that is, one of them is drawing around anything. So here you have darks on all sides of this thing. It's too early in the
Yeah.
drawing for that. All you need is all you need is some point. So either this thing turning here or this bend here. But to do two of them gets you into time-consuming stuff. And what happens is you start you start being influenced by things that are really difficult to prove right. And why would you spend the time there anyway? Because what you're really trying to establish is cosmic distances, right? These great locations like this. You follow that. That's not, you get that. I'm
Yeah.
sure you get that already. But I avoid that even at the head. I try to avoid drawing around the head until I've been around and round, right? So we'll pretend you did that. And but out here, it would have been good to have this point. It would have been good to establish this point out here. So you see, 1, 2, 3, say 4 and 5 points would be like a star. You would actually have a star right there. So you see what I would recommend, and
Yeah.
then talk about some aspect of it in here. I don't actually look for crutches like something that plumbs with something. That's not. I don't do that. I just set up this abstraction. And by the way, for everybody who hasn't heard the word, this thing you're seeing, the reading, let's talk about it over here. This thing floating, 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 the figure created by what I just pointed out as 5 stars, 5 points on the star. That is what we call the arabesque. That's the figure created by the leading lines. We say the leading points. So it's a constellation. And you want to get good at that. So, Shawn, that's where I would have had you out here. You're here to get the low point, but I really want you to be out here, to be over here, to be out here, and to be out here, and then you've got it covered. You see that?
Mm.
And that will
Yeah.
establish your great mass and the big gesture almost every time. But what you're doing is good. This is all floating stuff. But to spend time inside here when you haven't been around, that's a mistake. And to make widths, including here, to make those widths become an issue, and you lose time when you really want to establish the gesture of this great figure. Okay, you follow that. This is called working from the outside in, or from the greater to the lesser.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have questions about what I've said so far?
Um,
For you folks out here, this is what I've been trying to get at, where I can talk about this and have somebody respond to me. So Shawn's my second guinea pig, I guess you could say.
I do have a question about to the extent of which I'm trying to create a light effect and massing out away from the edge, like up by the head and down by that bottom point of the base. Like, to me, what in my idealized way, I would be massing that out over the course of a minute or two
Okay.
to blow out that value. But it takes me a long time because I'm trying to create a flat, even, and that's a flat, even value there.
Yeah, so you mean a
And that's
joint.
where I'm
You
trying
trying,
to.
this is that Benson conversation, two flat values, this one and this one. That's what you
Right.
mean? Yeah. So are you saying that it takes a while for you to figure out how in the heck to do that even? in,
Yeah,
in your in
I'm
your
just trying to
education?
wonder if
Yeah.
it's like I'm just wondering if I'm being too sensitive or too meticulous about the surface of the paper and the charcoal at this stage in the game,
Yeah.
or that I just have to create a flat, even tone, and it doesn't matter how solid the tone is in terms of the interstices of the paper.
Yes, okay. Well, that's a prospect at the beginning of a drawing like this. Number one, you want to start light. You see that Shawn has actually started relatively out of black values. He didn't go climbing in there and blasting black values on a page that has no certainty about where anything is. So he would have wound up, for example, if he puts this thing really black and then finds out he has to raise it, he would have a massive stain there, would never be able to get the light effect back. But the second part of this massing part is we want it to look relatively flat, but it doesn't have to be slicked up. That's in the next instance. So it's going to be out of value. It's going to be just dark enough to create a silhouette. And it's going to be just masked enough to give you a clean cut silhouette, a line, right? A contour.
Okay.
That's all. No more than that. So if you can find a way, this is a question you were trying to put to me, and that is, what do these look like? These are efficiencies. So it's definitely, so what we have, what I'm saying is that it's a preliminary mark, but it's an effectual one, right? So this looks
Mm.
like a good cutout, just like it looks like a good cutout in nature. It's not absolutely cut out, but the sharp edge, even at low contrast, is hugely effective. Now you could down here have said, "Why?" I could say, "Why did you cut me a sharp edge here when there isn't one?" That's
Uh-huh.
problematical, right? This one should be a turning edge. And if you're going to draw it, that's where I'm asking you to go ahead and articulate that, but not in a noodly little fine way that takes a week, but in a large way by walking over here, noticing where the light is at its maximum, and then moving that value darker and darker to the edge until it has that generalized look, and then getting out of town. Okay. But it will
Right.
suggest that form. So sit on it until it suggests that form pretty good, but not. And by the way, when you're and I'm saying not something time consuming, but if you're a student, it will be more time consuming than when you're good at it. And remember, this is like rather Gamel's not wrong. This is like a sketch moment. You're doing rough articulation, but it's effective. Like so, a sharp edge here, turning edge here. I'm not looking for it to be refined. I'm looking for it to be adequate. And but when he gets over here, this is going to be sharp edged all around, just like it's all around here. The one thing I would critique you for, Shawn, is not giving me that sharp edge there.
Yeah.
This really is the top of your painting. This shape, you're making it like a top of head, but I can't even see the right side of his head, the top of his head. So this is a very powerful top. That's an excellent one if you come straight down and cut that. And that's the way I
Mm.
suggest you do it because it's the
I
highest
see.
point in the entire thing. Is that answering your
Well,
question, or will that come back in
it does.
another? Okay.
No, it answers very well. I have one more question though on that,
Yeah,
or just
please.
a follow-up question. You see along the base, there is the where you were telling me that softer edge,
Yeah,
the
right
turning
here.
edge,
Yep.
and then just above that, if you follow the shadow or the dark value, there's like the long edge of the base, the
This,
width of the base.
this part here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
and it's
Yep.
like a power. It's a high contrast kind of dark
Right.
edge,
Yep.
consistent all the way across, and it's like something is screaming at me to
To
create
do
that
it.
whole edge, and I don't want to do
Okay.
that.
Watch
So
now. This is actually a wonderful question. And by the way, what's your conclusion before I answer the question? Because you've been around a bit, you probably know. In fact, I've already
um,
said it in this video. These prioritizations are huge. The ones I'm talking about aren't questions of, okay, maybe sometimes. These are huge. So what I'm trying to get you to do is give me the great outer parameters. We said one here, one there, this one here, and this one right here. That will deliver you this huge gesture and proportion of this thing in large. Now, it's only a generic thing, but it is a big figure. So I don't want you here.
right.
I need you right there. But if you can just phase this out and not talk about that for a minute, because you don't really want to put the time in there because you haven't given me the reader. So the base is the bottom, the reader is this one, and it's the corner floater, right? You float this one, float that one as you
Mhm.
seem like trying to do, and just keep doing it and float this one. When you go to master this, go ahead and figure out which part of this is going to be the most useful to you. But don't draw hands and fingers and all this sort of stuff if you can avoid it. Just maybe down the arm and around that corner. And all I'm looking for in all these places is a single point like that. And this is, I suggest to you, this is the point angle conversation of Sargent. Okay. So
Okay.
if I'm working over here, it'll be this outermost point right there. And if you
Yeah.
can avoid drawing badly other things, it's way better. This one here might be like the one you come around this corner here and then you let it drift. But you don't start drawing this line out here and make an arm out of it necessarily. But at some point, not real far hence, this line will be important. This is a major subdivision. This is a significant subdivision by strength. This is a major subdivision and picks up this. So these are subdivisions, very important subdivisions this way. But you can see I wouldn't have
Yeah.
had you in the middle of this figure yet. And you did that because you are operating from the mentality of the strongest effects. And you don't want to
Yes.
do that as your exclusionary. That's why I try to get people to see work from the outside in and place and put and the strong things, but also in and what you really must do is just make whatever you drew, that's all these 5 points, make them right to each other by effect. The effect just means the value contrast plus the edge, and do good shape work there, and then do it even better the next time around. And remember, each time you draw these shapes, your job is to articulate. You come down this corner and draw this shape. Your job is to actually articulate, memorize that, and draw it. Give me the look of nature there, and then improve it the next time around. Each place you go, and you're really heading in that direction, Shawn. I commend you for what you've done so far. But you can see that if I didn't have all this junk here, I would be sitting out here, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and if you can ignore this here, you'll see why. Big lines, major distances, major, big pentagon. All right. All right, let's go to the
Hmm.
second one then. Are you good?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. This is part two. And Shawn, right at this point here, and again, you're strong on this, but you're not particularly brilliant on the rest of it, right? And so that's where I'd really like you to have been out here. And I would like you to have established, right? This one is a very good plumb relationship with things over here, whatever there is. But I would just stay on that kind of thing. I don't know which one you're going to find most useful, but obviously what you're doing right now is you're coming around. I don't know why you're here when I need you here. You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
I think you have the figure in mind and something about instead of just the bigger abstraction. So I want you over here. And I want you to keep on powering this thing up as it continues. So come this down, shoot this down, and get this to go out. But it doesn't. See how it doesn't isolate effectively? Not quite effective enough. And by the way, now
Hmm.
this one is also not sudden enough. This travel across right there. You see, that's not sudden and abrupt enough. You're darker in two spots. You're lighter in the middle. That's not what nature's doing. That's a flat shadow. So give me that flat shadow look right from the top.
Wait, I'm sorry. Which area?
This one right here.
Oh yeah.
You see how weak you've made that in the middle? As
Yeah.
weak as can be.
Yeah.
There's no, I can't think of a reason to do that. I can think of a reason to make this portion weak. You see what I mean? Because it's got a turning
Uh-huh.
edge. But do you see what I need? I need you to have produced this and this as power stations. And instead you're
Yeah.
drawing a figure and adding elbows and things. And that's what I'm trying to get you to avoid. Work from the outside in.
Yeah.
And that's me, by the way. And there are times there are things, sometimes it's more effective to work other ways, but I'm just going to try to get people to think that way. This is an outside in mentality, and it fits Impressionism, which is an all over the place at once kind of a model. The Boston School guys will tell you to be all over the place at once in the start, and all over the place at once doesn't mean down the middle. All over the place tells me here, here, and by the way, if I have this line here, it means that too.
Okay.
So, but you see what I mean? Power out here, and it's power and use. Okay, so the top and bottom are hugely useful. They're very necessary. Why is that thing staying? They're really necessary, top and bottom, right? You get that. But so is the grand abstraction for you to be able to see this stuff and start making these overall great angles and proportions. These are big angles. This one, any of them. This is big. This one to here is big. So it gives you a big whatever the kind of shape that is. But you can see where I want you on this one, right? You have questions about it? I'm going to give you one more point
Um,
on this one after. Yeah.
that's it makes so much more sense, and it's so clear and obvious in hearing you talk about it like this right now. I'm looking at the picture together.
Right. Right.
And the real thing is that I am trying to see the figure emerge out of the fog rather than work from the outside in and
Yeah.
staying abstract.
So follow this thinking. I mean, there's no question that we are talking about a fundamental approach, which is outside in, but we're also talking about a fundamental approach. It's paint as if you're coming out of the fog. So it's an effect-based approach too. So how do you do
Okay.
that, right? Are you double-minded? Well, yeah, the answer is kind of yeah. Yeah, actually, always like set top and bottom, please. I mean, it's just common sense. Place this thing on the page, right? Frequently the top and bottom aren't the strongest effects. So why are you going to start in the middle of the painting? And you haven't set the top and bottom, okay? So
Yeah.
you follow me. So that's the pragmatism of all craft. You have things that, you have your ideals and then you have the practical, the way it must work in practice. But remember, there's always the spatial world and there's the visual effect world, the effect-based world. They're both there right from the beginning. And so what you find yourself doing then, and other people as well, they start doing all of this careful drawing without effects. And I'm trying to get you to do both. You follow that? I'm trying to get you to do good drawing, and make the proper effects to get it. But I'm asking people to go get this effect over here in this corner and make it as like as you can in terms of its the light effect compared to other effects, and then move it into the right place. And I don't say that incautiously, but most people insist on finding the right place before they draw the effect. And that's the one thing I would suggest you get thoroughly into your mind. But see, you're not failing to do that in some places. But the only problem you have is you're not in all these strategic places out here to establish the grand abstraction.
Yeah, I'm realizing that I struggle with the strategy of finding the grand abstraction because I'm thinking the gesture is in the figure rather than in the gesture of the effects.
Yeah.
That's the
Well,
best. That's a great thing to feel like.
yeah. So much of what we do is we watch for the gesture. We looked at it, by the way, in the first place. This grand abstraction has a gesture, right? And so we set up doing that. But then all you're doing after that is you're saying, all right, I own this in my mind. I'll recognize it when I see it. But then method says, first we do this and then we do that. And so there's the top and bottom and a few other things. And as you're making shapes, you keep noticing whether or not the gesture, you see what I mean? Whether or not the proportions. But it's not like we're doing stuff. It's just very funny. People think they can do stuff without the content being there, but and they do. But it's so crude and time consuming. I don't know how you can work on a beautiful piece of white paper like this and keep it clean with those hack mark type drawings. And I don't think you can. And this is the method of choice in most of the 19th century. I'm talking about drawing on an Ang paper. Right? Look at Ang's name is on this paper. What are we thinking? Now, Shawn, there's one other thing I'm going to say to you, and that is
Yeah.
with our other being all over the place at once. So you're out here making a silhouette, but you're also making a left side accidentally over here. And I'm going to recommend that you stop doing that. That if you're going to be out here, you can find some way to feather it for a few minutes. But the minute it starts becoming a mass, I need you to jump over to the shadow line and articulate it and mass from this way back, okay? Just jump over to the shadow line and give it a square corner and block it back the other way. And you'll find it way more efficient than creeping up on it. So for
Okay.
example, when you're on this edge here, you've obviously found that you needed to articulate this because you're so close, it looks funny if you don't. So you found a shadow line. But it's the same thing over here. I want you to see if the outside in model says you're out here, and you're out here, and then you're here, or you're here. Do you follow me?
Uh-huh.
So these are the next major points, the major subdivisions, the way we think. That's why I was
Yeah.
mentioning before, from here to here, the major subdivision. This is very clear because it's a horizontal line. It's a major subdivision. And so instead of creeping our way down there, we jump to those points. You
I
following
see.
that thought? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I got to stop struggling with that one.
All right. So here we are looking at the next one. And I didn't give you much of a question in that last one. Did you have one that we could answer here?
No, I think they'll come up, but
Yeah.
we can keep going.
Okay. So here again, you still have given me a square edge at the bottom of this area down here. You're still giving me a square edge. Now, one of the things I'm recommending in these is don't give me false statements. And I'm going to suggest you have two seriously false statements, but it's hard for the viewer to see. But you see what you've done. You come over into here and you work subplot. This is such a low plot.
Yeah.
Very, very, very low contrast. And if you're working, this is fundamental to the visual order. You blur your eyes and you don't do things like that. You don't work in areas like that. I don't care what your good excuse is. By the way, remember how beautiful that little shape was right there? And you started out with
Yeah.
really good intentions, and then look what you did. You started drawing this part you can't see when you had this powerful thing you can see. It's one of the things we love about Lost and Found is the idea that with this little thing here, you can suggest everything below it, but you're only working with strong guys. So see how much more articulate I wanted you to be, sharpen that edge, come sharply down and turn that corner, power it up, deliver, right? And you don't need this crap
Yeah.
down here to be your little helper. But again, here you're drawing something you shouldn't be drawing. This thing is out of its time. You're drawing it falsely, so that should be a turning again. Back to that, and this should just be more crisp, right? A little bit more crisp, but more. This should be flatter. So this line would easily work better if you didn't have these midtones lightening on the edge here. If you had this dark here right up to the edge there, shadows are flat model. This was clean. You'd have your edge quality, right? So, and by the
So
way,
with the
yeah, what?
with the base, the side plane of the base is a darker value than the top plane of the tabletop. But I would want to mask all of those in as one value.
Absolutely, yes.
I see it as one value, and I would make sure that that value is not as dark as the darkest value. Is that correct?
It isn't my worry. The major mass is all my worry. All I really care about by values is what happens right here. I couldn't care less about what
Okay.
happens down here.
Uh,
So
that's
you got these zoomy eyes. You know, you're just going right in there looking for trouble, and you're surely finding it. You know, so the question is when you start saying that, you know, look back in your head and say, who's asking? Do you hear what I'm saying? Who's asking a question like that? Not the guy who's thinking straight here. That's the other guy that you used to be.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, ask who's asking.
yeah.
Should this be a little darker than this one, right? Well, what mind is asking that? But it isn't the blurred eye mind, is it? The guy coming out of the visual order doesn't even see the difference, so he can't ask that question. He never.
It's a concern about about the paper and like, am I putting or not about the paper as much as putting down values that are darker than they should be, knowingly putting down values that are darker than they
In
should
the
be.
mass, in the dark areas, it doesn't matter because you can take them out with a stump beautifully.
Right,
Okay,
right.
not to worry.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, pretty little
Great,
heads.
great.
Pretty little heads moment.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So now, but what you have down here, you see the difference between the power of this edge and the, now assume that the photograph is true, by the way, and I hate to ever really do that, but it's as close as we're going to get for this exercise and conversation. You see the difference between this edge and effect and this edge and effect? In fact, even this one, look, this is the most powerful edge in the painting at the way you've interpreted it, isn't it? I'm talking in this area, sorry.
Yeah,
But in fact,
yeah,
the sharpest edge is this one over here, and you got this one every bit as sharp. Then there's the power over here that's more powerful than this one, I think. It certainly looks like
yeah,
it to me. If you blur down, it looks like this one starts disappearing and the other one doesn't.
yeah,
So do you see what I need? I need you to, this is like the classic thing. This is why you stay in visual order. You put something like this down and you write it to all the other guys that are in the neighborhood, minimally. Okay? Now,
yeah,
obviously, in a painting like this one, this is probably the most powerful effect up here, and then this over here, right? And they'll be the most seriously contrasty and the sharpest edges. And those guys, nobody down here should be getting past those guys. I almost said something about Al Banks, but I won't. Hi, Al. How are you doing? um, in any case, an inside joke. But again, here you are over here, not powering the corner up for me. You give me this, but you overstate it. But you didn't give me, you do this whole mass, but you didn't give me the corneriness of it. I like to quote David Leffel when he said that you got to draw the corner on the orange. You know, and so this is the orange, the roundness, the tube here, and the shadow line is sharp. And by the way, I don't even know if he meant that, but that's what I took it to mean when he said that. It's the shadow line. So from this point, that's why I say if you go over here and draw this, then mass backwards, you're not going to have funny things happening. But again, you're doing not unity. You're seeing this too darker and you're seeing this darker and leaving a gap of light in the middle. Follow the mentality of really making flat shadows, really flattening them. Flatten them from point A to point B, you know, from point A all the way down to whatever. One flat value. That's the first art in in painting, in charcoal work. It's flat. It's the first form, is flat. If you can't do flat, oh, I'm not sure I want to trust you with a round. um, but you follow that. And so here again, you're looking in, and it's nowhere near time to look in. So you're supposed to
right.
power this up, and then you're supposed to blur your eyes. You'll say, oh, and where does it go? Down, 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 down. It gives me this. But look at all this stuff I got in here. So you see how the unity really is? Dark, dark comes down here, makes one leg of dark, two legs of dark, and a third leg of dark. So it's a three-legged dark. Where's yours? All over the place. What are these values here? So remember, Gamma would say, and this is where I really find wisdom, is that we would draw from shadow line to shadow line. I say we draw from reading line to reading line. And what you'll see is this thing needs to be articulated. Then you have to say, where am I going? And you're not just trucking your little happy way along. You say, where am I going? Oh, if you blur your eye, you're going down to the kneecap and you power it off the page. Do you see where I'm going with that? This is a unified value. This whole thing is a place to get early and often. This value here, obviously, in this photograph at least, is the same. It's a three-legged dark. Okay. Isn't that simple, wonderful, whatever? The same thing over here. You're losing form because you're drawing a line down here and you're not making it very effectively, but you did a left side that's very ineffective. You just let it go when you could have drawn and said, and from this point over, it's going to be flat. And that would have given you this abstraction. The Gemmell used to call this pattern, right? This is the pattern, which he would describe it that way. The pattern of the dark is the shape of the dark. And look how impressive it is in nature. It's so easy to miss. That's why I have students actually do cutouts. Are you listening, Evan? That's why I have students do cutouts, so they're seeing the impressiveness of these shadow masses as pattern. They're really shapy. They're really wonderful. So if you're busy making human form, you're going to miss pattern. And for me to call this a three-legged black, that's my sense of humor, right? It's just fine. A three-legged black unit, black value. All right. I don't know what else is there something on your mind at this point?
Man, there's so much to take in. I think we're moving along, and I'm following what you're saying. It's really helpful. So okay. I'm looking at my questions, I guess, but we can probably just keep moving along here. Let me see.
Well, hang on to them unless they're apropos of this particular moment. Shawn, there is this again where you see how I want you out to jump to the shadow line? You're just creeping again. You articulate this, and then you give me the actual shape, but you don't give me the effect. I'm telling you, make the effect, make the shape, okay? Make the effect and let it lead to the shape. You were asking a question about tying on, and if you don't cut out a sharp shadow, you have nothing to tie on. In a sense, these midtones are actually tires, right? They are joints, buffers, but they, as it were, bleed into those other places. So it doesn't bleed from here over. It bleeds from the shadow line over, right? And the form actually starts at the end of the shadow line. But the other part about the shadow line, especially when it's this imperative, is it's so easy to get a measurement on. It's this to this to this. Is that a third? Is that a quarter? You know what I mean? It's so easy to do if you actually are say, and where's the shadow line, by the way? Because I intend to mask this flat. As I said, I jump out to here and mask the other direction, even though I may have found points along this line because it reads better. I still, as soon as anything going on here, I jump out there and say, who's in charge? I might find that thing because it's a locator vertically, and who knows what, or maybe even the sharper things, but whatever. I always will lead with the sharper ones, by the way, down a line like this, but you can see the importance of that. And when you get all the way down here to the toe, what are you doing? Drawing values, drawing a thing that isn't a thing, that isn't a value. So that's where I'm trying to get you guys. Once you've found yourself, and you may have found yourself in this value massing too fast, but the one thing I'll tell you about your values is they're out of unity. Do you see how you have this dark over here when it's probably the same dark or darker over here? You have a spot of dark down here, but the whole thing is dark. Do you see how you're out of unity with yourself? So once you have all these masses on here, implied, you immediately have this chaotic thing. Do you see how chaotic yours looks? I mean, the guy's body is caving in down here. I mean, it's all over the place. The simplicity, I remember finding one day when I realized the shadow line was one absolute line, same value all the way from top to bottom. I was stunned at how much unity that gave the picture, the figure. I learned that out of figure, an actual human figure. And we're busy drawing these cutesy lines and stuff like that. But man, my guy wouldn't stand up until when I cleaned up that line, the guy just stood like a rock. And this is a rock, so let's do it. Yeah. Yeah, so you see how you're wild and you're not following through. You're not following through with your values. It's okay, by the way, to say, I'm going to start some dark thing somewhere and I'm going to start the dark. But as soon as you do it, you have a new goal now, and that's to get all the darks. And by the way, look what you're doing down here again. You still haven't delivered me this little silhouette, but you're dang sure you're going to get me that. And again, you're not ready for this. This might actually be your darkest dark. I don't know. But the difference between these two is irrelevant, right?
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
can, by the way, that's a case where I don't have any problem with saving the darkest dark. You might want to make a smudge so you know where dark, you know how dark can be, but you could do that anywhere. I bet you this back here is every bit as dark as that there. So you could just make your darkest dark here, and just if you want to know what it's going to look like, you know how dark that's going to be. But yeah, so pull it together into unity whenever every time you get a chance. So you've got this all this stuff going on. Do all the work of pulling it together and correcting as you go. That's the recommendation I'm making here now at this point.
So is that for me developing and not being fully aware or disciplined? I'm gonna naturally be having this fall into chaos, and I need to just more frequently remind myself to pull it back together
Yes.
rather than
Yeah.
okay.
So as soon as you draw the top down here and this part down here, your job is to unify them. So you get the value contrast right, the edges right, get them aligned by angle right. And in other words, the first two marks you make, your job is to unify them. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And then as soon as you do like three of them, that's one of the things I really observed doing the figure when I was quite young was to see you get the top of head, you get the bottom of foot, and you get one hip, you can see your entire gesture. I mean, that's a kind of a cool thing. And so then to put the time into those 3 points until it delivers the unity of that impression, just do it all the time. It's fundamental. Okay?
Wow.
Pull it,
Such
everything you
a
ever put out there. So somebody said, and somebody who was hearing me well, he said, I'm into jazz. And when you said, throw these powerful effects out there, it's like a new phrase, a musical phrase. And then pull it all together into unity before you throw a new one up. You know, what is it going to be if every instrument in the thing starts throwing out a new line? You know, chaos.
I can't have that.
Yeah. So that's a fundamental thing, to always watch that you're pulling it together into unity. And we're talking about visual unity here. There's a very different model from drawing a figure. This is visual unity. So the effect-based information, the gestural, the spatial in the sense of proportions, all that stuff has its own inherent expression in unity. But one of the things I'm trying to get you to do, though, is like is this over here, this corner is a sharp edge. It's one of the sharpest edges out there, apart from this effect out here. And you're not delivering that. And down here, you're not, see what I mean? So you would, when you added all these things, you should have had long ago, you should have put them into rightness to each other. Now, do you see when I say that? If you look at the weakness, the weakness of this one to your eye, it drifts back. This one's stronger and this one's stronger yet. That should be happening here. This one shouldn't be sitting out in front like that. That's fakey. People will tell you tricks. Oh, make it sharper at the front side and it'll stick out. It will, but it won't be true. But what you're going to find, though, is if you don't do it the wrong way, you'll actually have to sharpen this and do a better job right there, sharpening that. And those are guys who are going to deliver the projectiveness to whatever extent sharp edges are doing it for you. But you also have a sharp edge right here at the bottom of the toe with powerful contrast. There's part of this area that brings it that has that projectiveness that comes to your eye. These sharp edges plus contrast, sharp edges, you can see how that's true. On the other hand, none of these come to your eye like that one. So I don't care what you say. This is not about real orders in space. Visual order is different. Visual order means what appears to come to your eye. So this over here comes to your eye way before this one. And you can see that these don't come to your eye as much as this one. So there's an order. This is the least, this is second, this is third, if you just talked about those three. The projectiveness to your eye. That's unity. So you see how much work you have to do just to pull this thing into unity with itself? Never mind other places where you shouldn't even be drawing stuff yet. Right? Like that. I keep beating on those. All right, let's go to the next one, Shawn. Let's go to the next one anyway. You don't have a further question here, right? By this point, you're finally getting to these square cornered edges. You lost the corner of this one. You still have this, unfortunately. Well, so what we say, remember, is that this low contrast area here, every area that has low contrast in this painting has to be done. Once you do this, you're committed yourself to that level of eye-opening. You're that level coming out of the fog. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Why get committed to that if you don't have the best of all proportions, shapes, and gesture with a plain, most of the delivery is already there, right? So you don't need these things to help you with these major things like the gesture. You don't need this junk down here. Ain't going to do you any good. But you should be getting this length, a better rightness to this one, and this thing is too long for this. So these are big things you're missing on. And in the meantime, you're spending time down here. You
Right.
with me? It makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the name of my curse right now. I'm just constantly, I'm always stuck spending too much time on the things I shouldn't be because I kind of get myself into the chaos, and then but it's very helpful what you said about just pulling it back together. Just being
Right.
cognizant of that, like having
Yeah.
that thought or concept in mind. Like that's what I'm doing here. Because I just keep plowing forward, thinking, well, I got to just keep working at it, and
Well, you're not wrong
progressing
about
forward.
that, though, by the way. You're not wrong about that. So don't pick on yourself for that. You're not wrong about it, but it's a question of when and how. The thing
Right.
but I think I'm telling you, this part here is not in the same category as pulling it together. This is absolutely not supposed to be there yet. You follow me? It's just not supposed to be
Yeah.
there yet. Because as long as you have big gestural problems, why are we doing subplot? The gesture is not in the subplot. So this is the coming out of the fog moment. You're way out of the fog here, and the car's going to hit you, man. You're dead.
I
Gee,
see.
that's not a bad job there. That's starting to show up. By the way, you see that bump of light right there in nature? You should deliver
Uh-huh.
me that bump of light so it has as much verticalness as it has. Because yours, if I look away from yours, because you're so busy showing subplot, you're making this really weak up here. This is the prime silhouette, this check mark right there. And you're not delivering me that. You're busy saying, well, that can't be any lighter because this is this. That's called thinking instead of looking. So if you take things in visual order, this thing is a vertical turning a corner, and that's power. It is real power. I don't want to know about this. I want to get this right to this or to that or to this, whatever. You follow me? I don't want to be down
Yeah.
here doing that because you're just doing that because it's there, right? Or you got your eye on the finish. Yeah, that's really deadly stuff. And by the way,
Oh yeah.
Shawn, this is where I say it so much. This line here, it doesn't curve enough, right? Now you can say I'm being fine, but why are we doing this when you have a big readable line that's wrong? Now you could say, well, I didn't see it. Yeah, you didn't see this width to height either, but because you're so aggressive to get to the end game. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So what this is, start slow so you can finish fast. And by the way, the other Stebbins quote is, and by the way, that's an Ang quote and several other people. But the Stebbins quote is patience is the hallmark of great painters. So don't be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Just stay with us, okay? So you can see how the angle and gesture, even of the whole base, is a little funny, right? It's got a little problem with tilt. It's got a little problem with width to length. And you definitely got these abstractions just out of this one here in particular is out of too wide for the height. This probably is okay. And there again, though, you seem to be drawing this. Now, by the way, give Shawn a break here because this photographs are funny, and he may be seeing it, he may be delivering it the way it is. But the fact is, even if this is there, this being wrong doesn't let you go there anyway. Do you see what I'm saying?
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah. Now, you see why I wanted you down here, though? Now you finally bring this. Well, congratulations. Don't you realize this is the right side of this? And if we're drawing like an impressionist, we don't see casts. We see shall we say arabesque. We see relationships of phenomena in space that we ignorantly work with. We don't try to understand it and say, oh, that's the drapery in the background. We do that after the cast. No, we're playing the
Right.
game of the visual play. This to this, to this, to this, to whatever. That's why you wanted that there in the first place. So, yeah.
I mean, even the value of the background in the lighter area, the lighter value in between those two dark verticals,
Right.
that should have been put in a while ago. I'm assuming.
Well, I mean, if to the extent that this is accurate, um, this light effect here is based on that value. But if you're
Right.
modeling away inside here and this is actually lighter than this, that's a big problem, a simple problem of big relationships.
Yeah.
Now, how and when to do it is up to you, but if you're waiting this long to do this, I'm going to suggest to you, if you had articulated this thing at the beginning, even just this much of it, you wouldn't have waited so long probably, because the power of this knee over here in relation to this is ridiculous. And that's, by the way, one of those things we try to do. We try to set up the cast so it's stronger than the background, especially when there's light in the background. And we do, by the way, for all you people who haven't heard this before, we do try to set up a strong silhouette on all sides because it makes a great study. It takes full advantage of all the work the sculptor did, right? And remember, you're studying art as well as other things. Yeah, so you see, Shawn, as long as you can see things to do in the majors that are in the area of drama. Now, some things you're going to miss. I have to pick on yourself. Just correct them when you see them. I mean, maybe you would have missed this for a long time. Again, it looks like you're doing a little weakening of this effect, when in fact, if you look away, it's a pretty strong effect. And you probably don't have to weaken that. You could make it as a big, powerful silhouette. If you look away, it's a big, powerful silhouette. Do it that way first, and you'll probably get the shapes better. The big, powerful shape, the big silhouette. You'll probably get it better. Yours should stick out a little further, probably, or else should be shorter this way, one or the other. But nothing about this is bad, though. You really did all the things I would have been expecting you to do. So pulling it together the way you finally did, except for going to think, this is not, as it were, the finish. This is actually just moving the values to the darkest level now. You darkened all these things down back here. You pulled the unity of all these darks throughout here and all that sort of thing. So you did pull the whole thing to unity, so you've done well here. And now it really is a question of, have you really got the magic of the gesture? For example, this hip seems to thrust out more before it goes down. There's a different beauty. It's a more serpentine line here. You've got a sort of a straight thing happening here somehow, right? Do you see that? So the thing I want you to do, and any people who are watching this, is just keep on seeing the cast in front of you. See the beauty of it, not the fact of it. Don't even start drawing if you haven't found what's to love about this gesture. And by the way, you turned the cast until you loved what was there, right? Hopefully that included just the life in this game here, running through here, this serpentine line, whatever you want to call that. And so for us to keep watching this thing and thinking finish, 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 when we are actually supposed to be saying more and more quality, more beauty of that gestural line. And by the way, gesture isn't just a general thrust this way. Often the gesture encompasses a sweep, and this is rather like an S curve. There's a beauty to it that does a SE rather thing. So I don't think of this as a straight line. It's just not good enough. And it's not even just an S is good enough, but you have to see it in its complexity. And so that's when somebody asked me recently this week about how we get how you see the thing as a whole. I can't tell you can hold the whole thing, but you can actually look at it long enough until you've managed to let it into your mind and into your soul and grasp the feeling of the beauty of it. And then that's what you'll be expecting. And every little mark you make, you'll be wondering, is it doing it yet? Is it doing it yet? Is it doing it yet? Because you're in love with this thing. Is you actually want the viewer to see, which is the prism of the personality, right? That's been done through so that's what your interpretation is. It's not an interpretation in the sense of you're just twisting nature. It's an interpretation, meaning you've looked at this thing until you're just stunned by the beauty of it. You're going to sit on this drawing until it does it. So watch out that you don't turn this into a mechanical process. It'll eat your lunch. Just a little thing like the angle of this right here. You see how you're vertical there? Do you know how much that's costing you? That's costing you a ton. This thing, this bony ridge right here, you see the angle of that and the decisiveness of it? Well, the lack of it probably it causes you to do this. Do you see what I'm saying? So you really have got to be on your game all the time. And the game is that the thing? Is it playing to that grand unity of the great gesture? Because you never know which little thing you're thinking is nothing because you got this other idea of what finish is. And we're not after finish. We're after magic. Keep remembering that. We want truth and magic. Shawn, talk to me. What do you got? Is that all clear?
Well, yeah, it's very clear. I mean, you're bringing to the forefront just some of the things we've talked about in our last critiques and what I've been reading in that Sergeant Charteris book.
Right.
Monet is talking about. I think Monet is talking about or maybe he was quoting Debussy or something like that. He paints what brings him pleasure, or I'm sorry, maybe Debussy was talking about like his method in writing music, what brings him pleasure. He doesn't follow a system or something like that.
Right,
But
right.
I've just it's one of the big things for me that I've noticed. Accuracy. It's almost like accuracy can only get me so far, and it seems like they just keep coming up now. Is that accuracy can't get me any further? It's useful as a tool, but it's just
The problem, Shawn,
it has its limits.
yeah, the problem is that if you start by being a mechanic, you'll end mechanically. If you start
Right,
by being a spirit, you'll end spiritually. You follow me?
right.
If you're not
Yeah,
engaging this guy as a live phenomena, beauty is a live phenomena. Beauty is not a fact-based thing. The strange thing is it's all facts all the time, but it's not driven by
yeah.
that. It's driven by the life. When we were students, we'd say, does it have it? Right? Nobody ever knew what it was, but it didn't, mechanical stuff doesn't deliver the it. But nothing does
It's
if you don't have it already in your soul, pre-digested in your soul. And I'm talking about the littlest thing to the biggest thing. There's magic all over the place. And you've picked up some in through this thing. But not enough and not big enough in that. And by the way, I don't mean to say that in a way like I'm judging it. It's not enough, not big enough, only meaning in the sense that there's more life in that big thing. It's still your interpretation. And in the end, you got to satisfy yourself that you got what you came for. So that's
yeah,
really huge, really huge. By the way, even the size, never mind the angle, even the size of that being off can cause a whole different effect. If it's big, it'll make the torso look small. It does things like that. And so it creates a different sense of grace or stumpiness or something. You never know what these little parts are causing. Yeah,
yeah. It just the more I realize, sometimes I show up into the studio and I'm like, okay, let's go through these motions or do this system or make sure I'm doing this.
right,
But
right.
it requires such a discipline but not even a discipline, a commitment, a devotion to beauty,
Yes.
to really be in that place and make sure I'm there, painting or drawing from that place.
Just
And
when
that's
you're
something
just
that
getting the proportions and you're not already saturated with beauty, I don't want to know.
yeah,
But
yeah,
what I have found, though, is it's like the overture to a movie. When you first come in, if your thoughts are right, you'll end well. If your thoughts are into that, first of all, standing, looking 4 times before you ever make a mark, looking, looking, looking. I go, what's this got for me? You know, just don't stop looking until it starts owning you a little bit, maybe more than a little
huh,
bit. Do you see what I mean? You start that way, and every time you go to make a little back of a knee, you'll be doing the same thing. It's a matter of body integrity. Your body tries. You set the tone for it in the overture of the whole painting. So you walk in the room and just start applying top and bottom, mechanic this, mechanic. I don't care if you're working from the outside in or from the visual. I don't care what you're doing. And you haven't stood there and gotten saturated with the beauty that's in front of you. I mean, like, well, good luck with that.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
it's not gonna pay off. You'll be a mechanic at the end. You'll keep trying to do it that way, and it's a matter of trying to maintain the unity of your own behavior. That's why you got to get
Wow.
these behaviors fixed in your brain until they replace all the other ones. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Uh,
We're coming close to an hour, and we haven't died yet, so I think I'm okay past 40 minutes. Shawn, I'm going to go to the last one, and then if I can safely, is that the last one? Yeah.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and in this one, by the way, you still haven't gotten me the difference between the background. See what you've done? You made him look like a gray cast.
Yeah.
Well, what's causing
Wow.
that? Huh? Now, again, the photographs can be funny, so I don't want to pick on you real hard, but think about what you said in the last one and how it relates to this one. Again, this isn't about noodling. This is where, at the end, Degas would say, "I'm not trying to cross the T's and dot the I's. I'm trying to make sure it's in harmony." That's when it's
Mm.
done, when it's in harmony. So don't bother going and trying to noodle up nth degrees to show you can. You're going to be noodling it more and more as you go along. It's just inevitable. You're going to be spending more time on more as it were minor things. But never take your eye off, as Bench once say, the composition. Never take your eye off the big point of this thing, no matter what little thing you do. And this drawing can drop dead. You can just get sick of it and quit, and it'll be a great drawing. noodled
Oh,
or not
oh,
noodled. That's why I don't like the
yeah,
model of noodling from the start because it's a dumb model. When you get to the end, you cross all your T's. Well, there's in fact no end to crossing T's and dotting I's when you think that way. Uh,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, but
Um,
yeah, yep,
Maybe one thing you could talk about is something that recently came up. We were talking about how I was generalizing areas
yeah.
in,
Yeah, that did show up earlier
and
on, and I didn't talk about that, but we could talk about it here in the head, for example.
oh yeah, it might come up again in the other, yeah, in the other drawing if we go there. But
Yeah, we may not go
you
there,
know,
Shawn. We're running ahead.
okay,
So Whitaker's
I
already going
see,
to
I
be,
see.
Mr. Producer's already going to be having his patience
Sorry.
strung out to the end.
Yeah, I guess maybe just the thought was how the the generalization without addressing them, how it leads to a certain look
Yes.
or a certain, it ends up taking the drawing to a place that is left generalized in a
Yeah.
natural way.
Yeah, in a little bit of a false way. Yeah. Well, that's one of the standards is what you're doing on the top of this head. You see how on this one here, this reads as bumpinesses? This one
Yeah.
reads as a generalization. Now, I think you've got more in there than it shows. But one of the things I do is if I'm doing a skull like this, I really do want the form to show, right? That's a thing. It's a big deal. In fact, when the value of movement across the skull, producing that skull, that thing is a big deal. But then so are these bony points. Like there's one there. You see this one here, and this bony point
Mhm.
here, and even some of these readers here. So if what you want to do is go ahead and deliver some of these other bits in there. You could even do this in a broken value way to show it that it's busy, but you want to deliver me a couple things like this one or this or something. This one, by the way, because it's a major reader, and it gives you a distance from here to there, for example. So you might want to do that just to get that going. That's no different from the face. By the way, and this is where people wouldn't be wrong if they said, well, but if I blur my eyes, I don't see that for a while. It is true. But on the other hand, when your eyes are wide open in generalized ways, which is that's how you look at the thing when you're trying to see if it's in unity, you don't blur your eyes. You just generally look at it. And when you look at this thing in a general way, this is busier up here, right? So the face is very busier, but this is busier as part of the general unity, right? So that's what I'm trying to get you to do when you're in these things. But if you generalize this and have tubes everywhere, it's going to look like that, and it won't be articulate, and the whole drawing will be trying to live up to that. Live down to that, you might say. So I'm finding that what I really want to do is when I have, for example, a great shadow line, I want to blow the great form. And there is a certain simplicity to it. And then to the extent that it doesn't look right, I shift from an egg, like this thing could be handled as an egg, obviously, couldn't it? But the minute it's not precisely an egg, you got work to do, right? And I mean that minute. And that's all I'm saying about these. So, but I'm not opposed to generalizations that are based on powerful events. Like you can say, well, in general, this thing goes from darker here to lighter and lighter and lighter. And you can say that, but then you look away and you'll see that in fact there's a bony edge to that. So there's like a short plane given there. And I don't necessarily need everything in there, but I may want to pick up part of that so the general impression is delivered to me that there's a front plane, the bangs of his hair or whatever that is. Ask me it a different way, Shawn, if that's not coming across.
So it's up to me to kind of. So I'm realizing that I'm always approaching everything singularly, like I'm approaching how I draw each effect the same way. The placement of the edge, and then a smooth or slick value up against two values to create that edge. But the way if I were to imagine like painting with charcoal and
Right.
treating this as a painting, there's so much more types of brushstroke that I could be using to create the impression,
Okay.
uh, more looseness or something. But I'm not loose with my charcoal. I'm so
Right.
tight in it.
Right. No, it's because you're an itemizer. And so the generalization helps you with that a little bit. But there are better ways to generalize, that's all. There are times to generalize, there are times not to generalize. But I do find that there's so much complexity to like this form here. And if I paint it from the little complexities instead of saying, let's do a tube and see if I have to do anything else, I find that's a huge thing. So if it's tubular, I'll do a tube. And as soon as, but then my job actually is to stay there and not just do tubes all over the place. My job is to go down there and give myself the first shot at just exactly how it isn't a tube in the simplistic minded sense. Do you see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that would be like this. Where did I see it? This in particular, though. And but by the way, in your case, you've broken this up some. It doesn't. This has a harder edge here and a harder edge out here, or a very decisive edge out here, and right through here, it's very well. Shall we say it's cornery right through here, and yours is generic right through there. So the form is wrong because it doesn't have this light. Do you see that?
Right. Yeah.
So that form being wrong. So the minute you made this as a generic thing, now you should have done it. You should have had this as a stronger effect right here. You should never have weakened that to nothing. That's a generic thing in itself. So as soon as you do this, you get these middle tones in here and you realize that's no longer reading like from across the room like it should. Then you have to go back and darken your darks, or you have to do something else to clarify that shape. But that's a reader. This corner is the next reader after this thing out here, right? You have this corner, and you have this. These are the three corners of this thing. You follow that? So that's a generic handling of it. It just rolls from this edge, just rolls over, getting lighter and lighter, and then back to darker and darker. Cut edge here, and there is a corner. Call it the corner of the orange, if you like. But that's all. But so if you stay tubular, so now this could be an argument like you see Ang, and sometimes he just looks like he's staying tubular. He works from the tubes. He always talks about working from the round rather than from planes. And that's a degenerative thing. I mean, he sometimes looks bad because of it. And I work from tubes as well. I think it's way more efficient. But I don't leave out planes. Now, when I said there was nothing, this is a reading edge, this is a reading edge, there's nothing inside here unless you're talking about that highlight. When I go down here, there's a square edge right there. There's a square edge here, there's another one here, there's another one there. Look at that. Those are all edgy, sort of flat. So those are planar. So this doesn't look true because you just ran it flat, right? So you left out the shin.
Right.
For you guys who like anatomy. Yeah. But again, stay with the idea of flat shadows. One of the things I want you to understand with flat shadows is whatever value you put here, and 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 see if it isn't true. That's a generalization. And if it's true, your figure's going to have way more unity. It's going to be simpler. If it's not true, you get to jump in, mess around. But it's the same thing as saying make a tube and then find out if it's not a tube. You know what I mean? I hope that's enough to get you going on that one. Shawn, do you have other questions? You had a list there. Do you want to throw out some other stuff at me?
Well, one of the questions I had was the difference between realism detail versus impressionism detail.
Yeah. Do you have an idea what I mean by all those things? Now?
Yeah, I think to some extent realism details it's the finger, the whatever, the thing, but the impressionism detail is just like that main arabesque in the beginning. Those are the effects. The details are those effects that are going to deliver the information.
Yeah, no, so the way you're using detail is very problematical. And everybody uses it the same way. What detail could mean, and most people actually, I think, even in dictionaries, I think you'll find the detail is something that's not very important. So that's the last thing I mean when I tell you to set up top and bottom. Those aren't details. You see how I mean that? But they're articulated. Yeah. So the articulation of it, you're saying, is a detailed articulation. It's not. It's a precise articulation. It's a fine articulation, but it's not a finicky fine articulation. It's a broad articulation. So when you came down here, you were supposed to snap that sharp and turn this corner. And you didn't. You never did get it done. You see, I wanted you to be more articulate on that thing right from the beginning. Do you see what I mean? Now, that's not detail. You see, that's not detail. That's precision in the top. And I expect this, instead of saying about detail, we should be talking about the look of nature. And I want the look of nature at the bottom. I want the leading edges out here. And that's why I'm mad about this one. You know, you still didn't power that vertical strong enough. But you see how mad I am. It's really annoying, isn't it?
Yeah, well, now that I'm looking at it like this, I want to see it too.
Yeah. You see what I'm saying, though? It's precise articulation. Now, detail to somebody else, and the way we mean it is, are you going to go in here and find the 13th nth degree of subdivisions in this area in any kind of an early phase? right? Because the nth degree of subdivision is what I think of as detail. And in the beginning and the middle and all the way almost to the end, these nth degrees of subdivision are just niceties. That's why Gamble used to say, "Let your granny do the rest," because you've already done the manly work.
Right.
So anybody can sit there in a little chair and noodle the little baby things all over the place because everything's set up. And I apologize for being like that. My granny would be very offended at me. But uh, but you see what I mean by that, right? So
Yeah.
so we have an articulateness. So when you do these fingers, when you finally get around to it, there's a broken finger here, and you're going to draw that, but you're going to probably draw it very early unless you really need it for something. And like that broken off end is really useful to get you some good measurements because it really jumps off the page. Do it early. Somebody else would say, no, that's a detail. The fingers are more important. The hand is more important than the fingertip, right? And the hand is less important than the arm. I mean, that's a different model. That's not our model. We work from the visual order, from the majors, from the outside in, and there's no part of those things when we're drawing it that doesn't want to be articulate. That's why we don't draw with hack lines and stuff like that. We go up there and draw that vertical line straight down here and blow that corner. And I want you, when you correct it to this one sitting out here or this one, I want you to correct them into unity, which means they have to have the look of nature here and the look of nature there. And that's what I refer to as the finish and the start. So other people would think his details is the finish. That's the look of nature. That's all I mean by it.
So, so what I actually, if I'm hearing you correctly, is just remove details from my lexicon altogether. Like
Yeah,
there's,
yeah. Or use it as a word that means you don't need that.
yeah,
Yeah,
right.
and that's what you'll
Okay,
find that conversation in Degas. You'll find that in good painters. Yeah.
okay.
It's,
Yeah, let me check another question if I have one here.
what did Leonardo say? Trifles make perfection, but perfection is no trifle or whatever. But trifles isn't the same thing as details. So I'll let you hang on that one, you the viewer. But go to your
Yeah,
next
yeah.
question, your next point. Yeah.
Um, well, I guess another thing that I was thinking is we were talking briefly about um, problem solving,
Yes.
and earlier today you were saying like I have to have problem solving as a system,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
I don't think I have that
Yeah.
so clear in my head, like what the stages or of the problem solving is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of the problems it doesn't do you badly to read a book on problem solving, but or two. But I do like this modern artist who said, "I'm not solving problems." He's with a real attitude. I'm not out here solving problems. but we, when we're drawing from nature, are actually solving the problem of what crap we put down, right? So the back straggler is like the first instance. You have to see the thing as a whole and correct only that part that sticks out for you the most. Well, what is that? It's taking the thing that's least like as a problem-solving measure. But one of the other problem-solving issues is you got to simplify. For example, you have a color problem. You say, is that a chroma problem? Is that a value problem? Or is that a hue problem? And you see, these are standard behaviors of problem solving. You see what I mean? That's not what we talked about
Yeah,
earlier. I know that. But the way you presented it leads me to that discussion instead of another one. Why don't we
yeah.
save that
I
one for
guess
another day, by the way? It's a really good one, but I think it's going to take too long.
yeah, yeah. That sounds good.
We're talking about method and how method is based on requires a kind of systematic quality to work, right? You have to find systems. You have to build yourself into a systematic person. Like, for example, automatically finding placement on the page with the first few marks. That's an automatic, right? And there are a lot of things like that. And so, in one sense, all we're doing all the time is we're trying to solve the problem of ourself. Why do we make crappy likenesses? Yeah, we can stop. You're getting bored. We can stop.
I think
My viewers are
yeah, it's
getting bored too.
my bedtime is well, I just started downhill real fast. I can't even get my words out properly.
He's a 3 o'clock in the morning guy. He's a farm boy, so we appreciate that. Was there any other idea that should we get out of here? Are you good?
The you know
Anything pertinent? We'll just
I
go for it
think
and finish it.
well the last one I had is like I have poor drawing skills to some degree with my proportion.
Yes.
And I let that pull me out of the visual order because I get fixed on locating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even now when I try to go back into that cast that I was working on, the other one of the head,
Right.
I can't see quite how to start to address other things other than
Right.
fixing
Right.
that
Yeah.
proportion.
Well, so what you have is what I call a default fear.
Uh-huh.
The default
Yeah, let
fear
me
for
let me
everybody
hear it.
is my shapes might be wrong.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
don't have the proper fear of having your values wrong, having your colors wrong. You know what I mean? And I'm trying to get you to not have a default fear. Don't just
Mm.
automatically default to my drawing is a problem. Because, and even I found, who was it who was saying this? I think it was Degas. He was talking about how red was a drawing problem. I apologize to you all for the way I'm saying that, but I ran into this thing, and he's talking about it roughly the way Hale talks when he says he drew about Vermeer that he drew so well because he got the colors so justly and that sort of thing.
Mm.
So if you can just stop making that your default, you live in fear of drawing. Why? You should live in fear of God, nothing else. Just in painting, why aren't you afraid of form? Why aren't you afraid of light? Why aren't you afraid of? Why is that the default? And then you find out that when you do that default, you're missing things that can deliver that better than the stuff you're working on. So the look of nature is a delivery boy for shape, for proportion. But we don't have any fear of not getting the look of nature. you know, it's a funny thing, isn't it? So you work on
That's
that
such
one.
a
Yeah,
yeah. Thank you for that. That is
yeah.
so well said, and I'm glad that that was documented, so I can go back and revisit that one.
yeah,
That was exactly
it's at the hour and 15 level of the minutes
yeah.
when you go back to look. Are we all set?
Well, that's
Yeah.
yeah. I think we are. That was so great, Paul. Thank you.
Shawn, you're welcome. Even though you look a lot like somebody, a character in an Odd Nerdrum painting, I've had a lot of fun with this.
Awesome. Thank you.
and and I hope everybody else has too. I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you all for your comments, your sharing, subscribing, and all the rest. And keep it coming. And I want to do more of what I just did with Shawn. You see the value of it, I think, in this one. So if somebody else is doing something where we can talk our way through it that you think might be as valuable as this, please be my guest. I will try to do it in shorter time. Mr. Producer, I apologize. I will understand if you have to turn this into two piece segments. I do not have a problem with that. So, all right, everybody, I hope you have a really good week and let me know how you think about what we're talking about here and if there's anything further I might say. And maybe we'll get Shawn back. He seems to be pretty well spoken. And Shawn's got a teacherly mind, by the way. I commend that in you, Shawn. It's a thing that, one of the things that you do when you're trying to learn how to paint is you just have to teach yourself how to paint. So verbalizing this kind of stuff is really a big deal. Try to get yourself to express. You hear ideas from me, put them in your own words, and then try to work them out to prove that you have it right in your verbiage even. But make your own little self-teacher thing out of it. But all right, Shawn, we'll talk to you next time. I'll see you at the studio in a few days. Have a
Yeah.
great week, you
Sounds
and
great.
everybody.